Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. So I want to welcome everyone in. I know that some of you may have joined expecting us to continue our series, Spiritual Care for the Quarantined. And we will be continuing that, inshallah ta'ala. But inshallah, on Saturdays, we will be continuing our weekly lecture series. And the next few weeks we are dedicating to preparing for Ramadan. And we're going to entitle this series Reflections as we prepare for Ramadan. So inshallah ta'ala today and for the coming Saturdays, this is what we'll be talking about. Different things related to fasting, related to month of Ramadan, trying to get ourselves prepared. Because despite what's going on outside, one thing that will not stop, will not cease, is our duty to be committed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the big exercises of commitment that is coming up is this month of Ramadan, this month of fasting. And so we want to kind of get prepared for that, get ourselves in the right mindset, get ourselves prepared spiritually and mentally and physically even, to receive this month appropriately and to get the full benefit out of it. So with that said, in today's segment, we will be commenting as much as the time allows on the verses which have prescribed, or the verses which Allah revealed to prescribe fasting. And those are verses 183 through 187 of Surah Al-Baqarah. So we'll be looking closely at those ayat, commenting on them, and trying to extract the benefits from those ayat. And so the first in the series of ayat, the first ayat in the series of ayat is verse number 183, which reads, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. And that means, the meaning of that is, O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed upon you, as it was prescribed upon those who came before you, so that you would obtain piety, God consciousness, so that you would be righteous and committed servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we'll go through this ayah. We'll try to put it under the microscope, dissect it, and reflect on each part of the ayah. So the first part, the ayah begins with the phrase, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, O you who believe. And this is a very common phrase which is repeated or mentioned repeatedly in the Quran. It's a very important phrase, and one of the signs of its importance is the fact that Allah repeats it throughout the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not repeat something just to be redundant. Rather, He repeats it to stress and to emphasize its importance, or because it itself is something which is significant and something which we should pay attention to. And it is always followed, invariably, this expression, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, in the Quran, followed by either a command from Allah or a prohibition. As Ibn Mas'ud, he said, radiyallahu إذا سمعت الله يقول في القرآن يا أيها الذين آمنوا فأوعها سمعك فإنما هو خير يأمر به أو شر ينهى عنه. So Ibn Mas'ud, he said, if you hear Allah saying in the Quran, O you who believe, then pay very close attention to what follows, because it is either something good which Allah is commanding you to observe, or something evil which He is prohibiting you from committing. And so invariably, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, what's going to follow? A command to do X, or a prohibition from doing Y. Now, with that said, what's the benefit? What is the subliminal message in Allah prefacing a command or a prohibition with this phrase, O you who believe? The benefit is that basically Allah is alluding to the fact that true faith and really being a believer hinges on what? On doing the command, if it's a command, or avoiding the prohibition if it's a prohibition. In other words, it's as if Allah is saying that true belief can only be achieved and realized. You can only be considered a true believer if you do X or if you avoid Y. And this is very important because we're trying to qualify in the sight of Allah as true believers. And Allah is telling us the way that you do that is by doing this or doing that. And if you don't do as you've been instructed in a verse that's been prefaced by the words, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, it's an indication that your faith is what? It's lacking. It's naqis. It's lacking. You're lacking in faith. Allah follows that by saying, telling us what is this thing that we have to do to be faithful believers. He says, Kutiba alaykum, prescribed for you. And this word kutiba, this term, kutiba, according to the scholars of jurisprudence epistemology, ulama al-usul, is one of the alfadh, one of the terms or the words which is indicative of religious obligation. It's an indicative that whatever has been kutiba, whatever has been prescribed, is what? Is something which is obligatory. So when Allah says kutiba, it's as if He's saying furida, mandated, obligated, required. You have to do this thing. It's not something optional or something where you have a choice in the matter. And Siyam Ramadan, which is the thing which has been kutiba, which has been prescribed, is fardun bi ijma' al-muslimin. It is something which is obligatory by agreement of the Muslims. There's no difference of opinion amongst the Muslims, irrespective of their schools of thought and their various sects. There's no difference among them that fasting is something which is obligatory in Islam, not something optional in our deen. And one of the, or there are a few proofs that buttress or support or confirm this unanimous agreement or support this unanimous agreement. One of them is this ayah, kutiba alaykum. As we said, kutiba means furida. Fasting has been prescribed upon you. Another one is the ayah which follows it, verse 185, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. Whoever amongst you is a resident during the month, then let him fast. This is a command from Allah. He has to fast. He has no option in the matter. He has no alternative except to what? To fast. And we also have the hadith collected by Bukhari Muslim on the authority of Abd'Llah ibn Umar, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Buni al-Islam ala khams. Islam is built upon 5. And he mentioned amongst those 5 was Sawmi Ramadan, and fasting the month of Ramadan. The scholars of Islam, when they looked at this hadith, they said that the Prophet ﷺ is basically telling us that Islam cannot stand except in the presence or in the existence of these 5, or in the observance when these 5 are observed. That's the only way a person's Islam can stand. Without these 5, a person has no Islam. So if these acts, Sawm being one of them, fasting being one of them, are from the acts that if you don't have them, you don't have Islam, that means they're the most obligatory, fundamental, elemental, and mandatory acts or rituals of Islam. That's a key indication from the Prophet ﷺ that these are not just obligatory, they are the most obligatory acts of Islam. The main things that every Muslim should be doing and must be doing in order to qualify as a Muslim. ثم بعد ذلك, Allah follows that by saying, كتب عليكم الصيام. الصيام في اللغة. Fasting in the language of the Arabs means al-imsak. It means to refrain, to abstain, to withhold, to practice abstinence. And in the language of the Arabs, it encompasses abstaining or refraining or withholding from anything, no matter what it is. Person says, today I'm not going to eat any chocolate. That person is fasting in the language. Person says, today I'm not going to speak to anyone. That person is fasting in the language. Person says, today I am not going to exercise. I'm not going to drive my car. I'm not going to do this, that, or the other thing. That person in the language, if he's refraining or abstaining, he is linguistically, in the language of the Arabs, he is observing a fast. And one of the evidences for this is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Maryam, where he says he says on the tongue of the angel who spoke to Maryam, he says, فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي وَقَرِّ عَيْنًا فَإِمَّا تَرَيِنَّ مِنَ الْبَشْرِ أَحَدًا فَقُولِي إِنِّي نَظَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. Said, so eat and drink and cool your eye. Be calm. It's going to be all right. فَإِمَّا تَرَيِنَّ مِنَ الْبَشْرِ أَحَدًا. And so, if you come across hereafter any person, then tell that person, I am observing a fast for the most merciful, so I will not speak to anyone today. Now, look at the ayah closely. The angel tells her to eat and drink, but tells her simultaneously to observe a fast, or to tell people she's observing a fast. So obviously her fasting was not from eating and drinking. فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. I will not speak to any person this day. Her fast was from what? Was from speaking. And so that shows you in the language of the Arabs, a person is considered fasting if they what? If they abstain or refrain from anything, no matter whatever that thing is. But in the language of the Shara, in legal terminology, in religious speak, fasting is much more than that. Fasting is much more specified than that. And it is, as the scholars have defined it, التعبد لله بإمساك مخصوص وهو الإمساك عن جميع المفطرات من طلوع الفجر إلى غروب الشمس. So basically, the scholars of Islam have said, define fasting in religious speak, legal terminology, as worshiping Allah with a specific type, a certain type of abstinence. Not any type of abstinence, as is in the case of the linguistic meaning, but a specific type of abstinence. And what is this specific type of abstinence? It is abstaining from all of the fast breakers. From the crack of dawn until dusk. From the crack of dawn until dusk. طيب, let's look at this definition a little bit more closely. At-ta'abbud lillah. Worshipping Allah, that means that a person has to do this act, this act of abstinence, they have to do it an qasdin. They have to do it purposefully, with the intention of pleasing Allah and earning reward from Him. They can't do it accidentally and rush out the door going to work and get to work and get so busy with work that they never put a single thing in their mouth. Don't even take a sip of water from the water fountain. They come home at the time of what? Sunset, and they realize, oh, I fasted today. No, you didn't fast today because you didn't do it with what? An qasd. You didn't do it purposefully. You didn't do it with the intention to do it. You did it by accident. A person has to do it with what? With the intention, purposefully, with the intention of pleasing Allah and seeking reward from Him. But the second thing that the scholars said, بِإِمْسَاكٍ مَخْصُوص, with a specific type of abstinence, which means that contrary to the linguistic meaning of fasting, fasting in Islam means that you fast from certain things which have been specified by Allah and His Messenger. What are those things? جَمِيعَ الْمُفَطِّرَاتِ, as the definition goes on. All of the fast breakers. Notice the scholars didn't say fasting from food and drink and intercourse, which a lot of us, we say that a lot. We say that Muslims, we fast from food, drink, and intercourse. But to be honest with you, the mufattirat, the fast breakers, are more than these things. It's more than just these three. And so therefore, it's more than just food, drink, and intimacy. It's what? More than that. Which is why the scholars, they instead of using these specific terms, they generalize everything which breaks the fast, because there are things beyond food, drink, and intimacy that can break the fast. And then last but not least, min tulu al-fajri ila ghurub al-shams, from the crack of dawn until dusk. And this is self-explanatory, but it basically means that there's a specific time frame in which fasting takes place. It has a certain ending time. It's not up to us to choose when to fast, to initiate the fast, and when to conclude it, but rather that's been specified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another good point that I want to point out here as we talk about fasting and its legislation, kutiba alaykum siyam, fasting has been prescribed for you, is that one of the beautiful things about fasting, and a lot of the things that Allah legislated in the Quran and the Hadith, which just by human nature and human wisdom, a person could perceive in advance that it would be difficult on the people to abandon right away. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does with those types of things out of his wisdom and mercy is that he legislates the change. If something's legal and he's going to prohibit it, ban it, then he'll what? He'll legislate it with what? A tadarruj, in stages. Similarly, if something is not required, but he's going to require it, he will legislate that requirement in stages. And this is what Allah did with fasting. Think about it. People who had never fasted a day in their lives, and you tell them, you got to all fast as a community and not eat anything from sun up to sundown, that might be difficult for them. You would imagine. You could imagine just with our own human perspective, our own human viewpoints and ability to comprehend, we can say, yeah, I can see how that might be difficult on them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his wisdom is what? Far greater than our own wisdom and ability to perceive. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like he did with so many other things, he legislated and prescribed fasting tadrijiyan, or bitadarruj, in stages. So I want to talk briefly about the stages of that legislation. So the first stage was the legislation of the fasting of Yom Ashura. Right? The legislation of the fasting of what? One day. And that happened. That was the first siyamun wajib. That was the first required fast in Islam. Prior to that, there was no required fast for the Muslims up until that. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he first came to Medina, he came obviously in the first year of Al-Hijrah, fi Rabi'in al-Awwal. In the third month of the Islamic calendar. He came in the third month of that first year of Al-Hijrah, the first year of the Islamic calendar, if you will. So he comes, and a whole year goes by, basically, or nearly a year goes by, and there was no fasting. The Muslims observed no fasting in Medina. And obviously they had observed no obligatory fasting in Mecca as well. So then, the new year comes. The second year of the Hijrah inaugurates with the first month of the Hijri calendar, Muharram. Shahrullah Muharram. And on the 10th day of that month, what we call Yom Ashura, the Prophet observed the Jews observing fast. So he asked them, so all the Jews, there were a lot of Jews in Medina, there were 3 big tribes of Jews in Medina, and they're all fasting. So the Prophet ﷺ, he asked them, Ma hada? So what is this? What is this day you guys are observing? And they said, this is the day, a great day for the Jews, a great day in our religion. It is the day that Allah liberated Bani Israel, the children of Israel, from bondage in Egypt. And he brought about the death of Fir'aun, their tormentor, and gave victory to Moses. So we honor this day, and we fast it out of thanks and appreciation to Allah for this victory. Whereupon the Prophet ﷺ, he responds by saying, Ana ahaqqu bi Musa minkum. I'm more entitled. It is more befitting that I follow Moses than you people. فَصَامَهُ وَأَمَرَ بِصِيَامِهِ. So the Prophet ﷺ, he fasted that day and commanded the people to fast. Now you have to understand this is happening while the day is in progress. This is not like the 9th or the 8th where he's asking them. The day is in progress. So what did the Prophet do? The Prophet appointed a crier to go about the town and to cry out to the people, Man kana akala falyasum. Whoever of you has already eaten today, then let him not eat for the rest of the day. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ قَدْ أَكَلْ. And whoever amongst you has not eaten, فَلْيَصُمْ, then let him not eat for the rest of the day. فَإِنَّ الْيَوْمَ يَوْمَ عَاشُورَى. So because today is the day of Ashura. So that second year, in the month of Muharram, the 10th day, the Prophet obligated upon the Muslims to fast Yom Ashura, and that was the first legislation of fasting in Islam. And thereafter, Ibn Mas'ud explains what happened thereafter, because we're what, in the second year of Al-Hijrah, the first month, the month Shahrullah Muharram. Ibn Mas'ud explains what happened thereafter. He said, لما فرض رمضان ترك عاشوراء. Ibn Mas'ud, he mentioned this, it's collected by Muslim in his Sahih. He says that Ibn Mas'ud said that once Ramadan became obligatory, Ashura was abandoned. What does he mean by abandoned? He means turika farduhu, la istihbabuhu. That basically the Muslims abandoned the obligation to fast Ashura. It became optional. And so thereafter they still fasted Ashura, but they fasted as an optional, a voluntary fast as opposed to obligatory fast. And this occurred in the second year of Al-Hijrah. Now we come to the second stage of the legislation of fasting, the second stage. What was the second stage? It was at-takhyir. It was being given the option, What does that mean? In that same year, the second year of Al-Hijrah, as we said, Muharram was the first month of that year. Later on, a little while later, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down revelation and obligated the fast of Ramadan. Okay, so it's the same year, second year, the same year that Ashura was made an obligation, was the same year, later on that year, when Allah sent down revelation for the Muslims to fast the month of Ramadan. But when He sent it down, when Allah first sent the revelation down to fast Ramadan, He gave the Muslims the option, gave them the choice, let them choose between fasting or expiating, paying a penalty in place of fasting. And that penalty was that they would feed a poor person, a needy person, for every day they didn't fast. So in this way, those who found fasting difficult and they needed some time to get accustomed to it, rather than fast, they could what? They could pay. So a person could actually, theoretically, they could fast one day and pay another day. Fast a day, pay another day. So they could basically gradually work their way into learning how to fast. A person could go the whole month and just pay fidya. A person could start the day trying to fast, trying, struggling. He could break his fast and pay fidya in exchange for it. So this gave the Muslims time to what? To get their legs underneath them before fasting became obligatory. And Ibn Kathir and other scholars have mentioned that this takhyir, this being given the option, was abrogated by the verse which followed the original obligation, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. Whoever is a resident during the month of Ramadan in his hometown and not a traveler and not ill, then he must fast. There's no more option in the matter. Okay? So that brings us now to the third stage. The third stage, and pay attention to this stage, it's a stage a lot of people don't know about, but this when fasting became obligatory, that you have to fast if you're a resident and you're not ill, you have to fast. The way that fasting was prescribed and when you could break your fast and when you had to start fasting again was different than the way that we know it currently. So basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did was He ordered the Muslims to begin their fast, to initiate their fast from Salat al-Isha. So when a person observed Salat al-Isha, after Salat al-Isha, he had to what? He had to stop eating and drinking and being intimate with his wife and any other of the fast breakers and continue that until dusk the following day. So, and then when dusk came, pay attention now, when dusk came the following day, that person could eat, they could drink, they could be with their families, but they could only do that until they fell asleep or until they prayed Salat al-Isha, whichever came first. Let me say that again. So, a person starts fasting from Salat al-Isha. A person prays Isha after that. No more eating, no more drinking, no more doing anything that would potentially break the fast. They continue fasting until dusk the next day, Maghrib, the next day. Okay? And then they're allowed to what? To eat, to drink, to be with their family, do any of the fast breakers until they prayed Salat al-Isha or fell asleep, whichever came first. So if a man came home and he found that there was nothing to eat, comes home from Maghrib, asks his wife, is there anything to eat? Nothing to eat, but I'll go get you something. And that man fell asleep. That man could not eat again or drink again or be with his family again until what? Until the next day at dusk. That's how fasting was once it became obligatory. And so what ultimately happened when fasting was prescribed in this way, there's one of the stories that led to, one of the stories that's mentioned of the incidents which led to the lightening of the restrictions and the easing of the method of fasting, was that there was an Ansari farmer who it happened to him just what we just described. He came home one day from his haqal, from his plot of land, exhausted, hungry, and it was Maghrib. And he asked his wife, Hal indakum shay? Do you guys have anything? Is there anything to eat? She said, no, but I'm going to go fetch you something. I'm going to go out right now. Just wait for me. So she went out. And when she came back, she found him on the floor, passed out, asleep. And she said, oh, you missed your opportunity. You missed your chance. So he went out. He couldn't eat. He couldn't drink. He couldn't do anything. So he went out the next day to his plot of land. And as he was working in the land and hadn't eaten for now what's going on 2 days now, he fainted. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the verses in which he said, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ. It has been made lawful for you going unto your wives on the night of the fasts. They are a garment for you and you are a garment for them. And he went on to say, فَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيْنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ ثُمَّ أَتِمُّوا الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. He said, eat and drink until the white thread of dawn becomes clear from the black thread of night. ثُمَّ أَتِمُّوا الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. And then complete the fast until what? Until sunset. Meaning that they were allowed to eat, they were now allowed to eat and drink and be with their families for the entire night, regardless of whether they slept or not, regardless of whether they prayed Salat al-Isha or not. And that is the fourth stage, which is the stage that we know now of fasting. That basically this is how it is. We fast until from the crack of dawn until dusk, and between dusk and the crack of dawn, we're not what? We're not fasting, and none of the restrictions are in play. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he concludes the ayah by saying, كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ, I'm sorry, no, he doesn't conclude it. There's two more parts to it. I'm sorry. Getting ahead of myself. كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. That Allah prescribed fasting on you, O Muslims, as He prescribed it on those who came before you. And what this is telling you is a few things. One is that fasting is one of the fundamental components. It's part and parcel of all of the divinely revealed revelations. All of the people before us who followed what we call it Adyan Samawiyah, the divinely revealed religions, they all fasted in one form or another. And this is supported by what we said earlier when we quoted the ayah from Surah Maryam, where she said, Inni nadartu lirrahmani sawman. I have made an oath, or I vowed a psalm to the most merciful. Which means what? It was common practice amongst them to what? To observe fasts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so one benefit is, like I said, this is a fundamental component of all the what? Divinely revealed religions. And just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated upon us, He obligated upon the people before us. So He's not asking us to do anything that He hasn't asked people before us. And they did it too. So we can do it. They did it, so you can do it too. But also, there's also another like subliminal message there. And it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, it's like, for example, let's say you had two sons, right? And, they're both, pretty good students. But sometimes because they're so smart, they might get a little lazy, right? And so they don't work as hard as they possibly could in some of the subjects. And they come home with these grades and you're like, come on, man, you can do better than that. So sometimes what we do as parents is we'll say, for example, oh, you got this? You got a B? That's pretty good. But Ahmed, he got an A. So we'll say that, he took the same class and he got an A. And we do that because that does what? That lights the fire of competitiveness within us. He got an A, then what? I'm going to get an A+. So it's almost like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Kutiba alaykumus siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum, that it's been written upon you, O Muslims, to fast. Like it was written on the people before you to fast, as if to say that you should want to what? To fast and outdo them. Do better than them. They did this. They did this. Now what are you going to do? That we should what? We should want to outdo them and do fasting, but do it even better than they did. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concludes the verse by saying, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may obtain piety. And there's a few benefits here, a few things that we can extrapolate from this ayah. One is that fasting is not a diet. It's not prescribed to primarily benefit the soul. It's not prescribed primarily to benefit the body, but rather primarily to benefit the soul. It is not a diet. Is there some benefit to the body? Certainly. But that's not the primary objective. And we need to understand that the primary objective of the prescription of fasting is to benefit the soul. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. The second thing that we can extrapolate from this ayah is that there is an objective to fasting. There is something that we are targeting, something that we're hoping to achieve through fasting. There is a goal. It's not merely a ritual or a punishment from God. It is something which is going to help us to achieve something else. It is a means to an end. It is not an end in and of itself. Number 3 from the benefits is that the goal of this fasting is a taqwa. And that lets you know that a taqwa is something worth striving for. It's something worth seeking, such that an ibadah, an act of worship, had to be prescribed in order to achieve it. That tells you this is something which is worthwhile, something Muslims should what? Should actively seek to possess. Then the fourth benefit of this part of the ayah is that this act of worship, a siyam, fasting, is one of the best means to achieve this lofty goal and objective, this worthwhile prize. Because if there were a better means to achieve it, Allah would have prescribed a different act of worship to achieve it. So since Allah specified siyam out of all the rituals to achieve a taqwa, it means it's one of the best ways, if not the best ways, to achieve this prized possession. And then last, and Ibn Kathir, he kind of, he kind of emphasizes this point and stresses it and elaborates on it by saying, لأن الصوم فيه تزكية للبدن وتضييق لمسالك الشيطان. He said, why is it the best way to achieve a taqwa? He said, because it not only detoxifies the body, but it also minimizes the avenues by which the shaitan is able to approach a person. Makes it easy for us to fulfill the command of Allah, Inna shaitan lakum aduwwun fattakhiduhu aduwwa. Indeed, the devil is your enemy, so take him as an enemy. It makes it easy for us to what? To defend ourselves against the shaitan. That's why fasting is one of the best ways to attain a taqwa, this prized possession, this grand prize. طيب. Last but not least from the benefits of this ayah, or this part of the ayah I should say, is that this month will train us. This month is a month which trains. It is the month of training. Trains you and prepares you to be pious. How can I be pious? This month trains you how to be pious. Conditions you to be pious. It's like a boot camp for God consciousness, for Islamic and religious commitment. So how do we become dutiful servants? By what? By following the regimen of Ramadan. If we follow the regimen of Ramadan, if we follow the regimen of fasting in Ramadan, then we will do what? We will achieve this goal, this objective of a taqwa. And at this point, I like to always give this analogy of a person who is like overweight and out of shape. And that person wants to get in shape. And so they look for like some type of exercise routine, regimen, program that they can follow to get in shape. And so, for example, they go and buy one of those DVD sets of tutorials, or they get like an online subscription of tutorials, and they get these, emails and videos to their mailbox. Or like I said, they have the DVDs or the Blu-rays or whatever, and they can just plug it into their machine and watch it at home, and then follow along with the instructor, do as they do, and transform themselves. And the person is looking at people who give like testimonials, and they say, yeah, man, I did, for example, P90X, and I don't know if that's a thing anymore. It used to be a thing, but al-muhim, just let's use it for the analogy. So the person says he's watching these tutorials, P90X, and the person is saying, this was me before, and I had no energy, and I was out of weight, and I couldn't get off the couch, and I started doing P90X, and now I've lost 112 pounds, and I have all this energy, and I can do this. And he's looking at that, he says, yeah, I want that to be me. I want that to be me. So he comes home from work one day, and he plugs in one of the DVDs, and he sits on the couch, and he's got this big bag of chips, and he's got this 2-liter bottle of soda, and he's got a hoagie, and he's watching the videos, and he is going in on these snacks. And he just, if one session stops, he watches the next session. He goes the whole first 30 days of DVD just watching them, checking them out. And every day he does the same thing. He comes home from the work and he does the same thing. Hoagie, chips, 2-liter bottle of soda, and he's watching these videos and just amazed at how these people are contorting their bodies, how much they're sweating, how hard they're working. He's saying to himself, yeah, man, in 30 days, man, that's going to be me because I'm watching these videos, right? And so 30 days comes and goes, and he's been watching the videos every day, and he's like, I'm still fat. In fact, I'm fatter than I was before I started doing the DVDs. And he wants to complain. He wants to write a scathing complaint to the people who sent him the DVDs, to the company that he bought it from, and he wants to tell them that this program doesn't work. But the reason why it worked is not because the program is not it's not because the program is broken or because the program cannot achieve the objective. It's because he didn't follow the regimen. You can't watch P90X. You have to do P90X to get the results. The same thing is true when it comes to what? As-siyam, and fast in the month of Ramadan. If we go into the month and watch it come and go, watch other people worshiping Allah, applying themselves, praying at night, praying Taraweeh, reading Quran, doing all of these things which are included in the regimen. We watch them do that, and we're amazed by how their commitment has been elevated and intensified in Ramadan. We're amazed by that, and we come home and tell our wives, man, look how the people are really getting it in. And we don't join them in that. Then Ramadan is going to come and go, and we're not going to be any better. In fact, we may be worse than we were when it came. But we have to follow the regimen. And what is that regimen? The regimen includes fasting, obviously, the way that we've been ordered to fast, and also reciting the Quran. The book of Allah has to be our constant companion in Ramadan. Also the night prayer. The night prayer is a big part of what is going to purify ourselves and give us that taqwa, that piety. Also increasing and intensifying our acts of worship. That Ramadan is a month of ziyada fil bir wal khair. It is the month of increasing and intensifying all the good deeds we do. Whatever we do what? We do double that, triple that, more of that in Ramadan. And also Laylatul Qadr, actively seeking the night of power, the night of decree, which occurs in the odd nights of the last 10 days of Ramadan. And also al-i'tikaf, if we can, isolating ourselves in the masjid, secluding ourselves in the masjid, and using the time therein to reflect upon ourselves, to make a muhasabah, to account ourselves, and to try to purify ourselves and make ourselves better. And with that, we will conclude today's session. We're getting close, I think, to Salat al-Maghrib, and we've spent close to an hour, not quite an hour, but close to an hour. And some of you may have got on thinking it was just going to be one of those short talks. But as we said when we first began, that on Saturdays we will resume and continue our weekly lecture series, and the next few weeks we'll dedicate to Ramadan and preparing for Ramadan, which is why we talked about the first ayah from the ayat that prescribe fasting. And hopefully next week we will conclude this discussion, and then in the following weeks try to get into some of the more fiqh related issues and prepare ourselves for just some basically refresh our memories on those things which we are critical that we apply and observe in order to fast Islamically. And with that we will conclude. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect all of you and all of your families and your loved ones from this virus which has many of us confined to our homes. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you, protect those you love, to protect our families, our friends, and all of the Muslims throughout the world from this virus and from every fitna and from every harm and from every injury. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide for those who, because of this virus, their means of revenue, their means of income have been adversely affected, and they don't know where their rent money is going to come from. They don't know where their next trip to the grocery store, how it's going to be paid for. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide for them, to provide ways and means for them, because He's the one who can provide, and He is the provider for all of us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every good for the Muslims and to protect us from every evil. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.